Almost Twins by Mark Fielding Darden. Chapter 1, The Cord That Binds. The year was 1950. As far as the world goes, it was just another day on the planet. But for Geoffe and Georgie Spaulding, it was the beginning of time. Geoffe came out first, and then there was some trouble. The X-ray had clearly shown identical twins on the way, but George was taking his time. Maybe too much time. The doctor finally decided to go after the little fella and applied lubricant to his gloves. Soon he got a hold of little Georgie's feet and was pulling him out. But it was immediately obvious that something was holding the boy. With a final tug, the doc brought Georgie into view, only to find a deep purple cord wrapped around the little man's neck. Quickly, the doctor slid the cord off his windpipe and brought the child into the open. He was not breathing. The doctor and staff went into well-rehearsed emergency procedures, but it still took several minutes to get Georgie breathing. After several hours, it appeared that all was fine, though no one would really know for sure until the boy reached 2 or 3 years of age. But for now, his air intake was acceptable, and he was crying as expected. Mrs. Spaulding was so excited to hold the 2 identical twin boys that nothing else in the whole wide world mattered at that moment. As the Panamanian doctor was about to leave the room, he leaned over and patted the new mother on her sweat-soaked head and whispered in a Spanish accent, "You did a fine job, Mrs. Spaulding. Those are some good-looking boys." Both kids stayed in the hospital a few extra days for observation, but by the weekend they were home. Chapter 2, A Day at the Beach, 1964. The water was cold that day. The 2 14-year-old boys had learned to swim at an early age, but the Humboldt current had just moved on shore, and the water was no longer warm. It was now dry season in the tropics, and January always brought the drier trade winds and the high white clouds that created spectacular sunsets every evening. This afternoon was no different. Although Loretta Spaulding and her husband Todd were on the porch of the beach house nearby, it was still about 1,000 feet down the hill to the water from where they sat with their friends, enjoying the late sun and breezes. 7 months of torrid heat and afternoon rains you can't see through had now given way to lovely afternoons and gin and tonic sunsets. No one was really watching the boys. Well, no human, that is. Geoffe was the smarter of the 2, although that's really not a fair way to say it. Due to birth issues, Georgie was slow, but Georgie was also the better swimmer. Both kids had been trained to respect the undertow and riptides. Both knew that they should not venture out past the breakers, because the beaches along that coast dropped quickly, and the water could go from 3 feet to 15 feet with just one big wave coming ashore. With that much water depth, anything was possible. Not only that, but the nearby river that emptied into the bay was always teeming with big fish eating little fish. So it was really surprising that afternoon when Geoffe looked out at the ocean while walking the beach and saw his brother swimming at least 100 feet past the breakers. And it was even more surprising when Geoffe saw a thick black fin slicing through the water, heading for Georgie from behind. It was a shark. A big shark. The beast was so big that Geoffe could see the water moving over its back like a half-submerged submarine, steaming towards his brother. Geoffe screamed, but Georgie just paused momentarily in the water and looked at him. He had no clue what was going on. Finally, Geoffe managed to think of the right words and yelled, "Shark! Shark! Get back, Georgie! Get back now!" But it was too late. The shark had already decided to make a meal of the bigger but lesser twin, and it had just taken a bite out of Georgie's foot. Without thinking, Geoffe dived over the next wave and in less than 10 strokes was beside his brother. Grabbing Georgie by the arm, he pulled past him just in time to kick the charging, open-mouthed shark on the nose. The shark turned for a moment and disappeared into the foaming water. Fortunately, Geoff's rescue effort helped Georgie manage to escape, and Georgie was soon past the breakers, bleeding the whole way, but almost ashore. Geoffe, on the other hand, was not so lucky. The shark was still hungry, and Geoffe was now fighting for his life, while his parents were contemplating the limes and their drinks on the cliffs overhead. The shark had returned and was all over Geoffe. Blood was everywhere, and the water was deep and cold. Time stood still. A horrible magic was in the air. Weird lightning struck somewhere nearby, or so it seemed to Georgie. Georgie looked out at the ocean in disbelief. Horror and shock were rushing through his brain, and his leg was bleeding badly. Where was his brother? The perfect brother who had just saved Georgie's life? An odd sunlight seemed to glow across the maroon waves as Georgie sent his eyes searching left and right and then left again. Where did his brother go? And what was that loud ringing in his ears? Georgie could not let his mind think the worst. Geoffe could not die. It just would not be. You got that right. Chapters 3 and 4, up next.